The U.S. Justice Department recently announced that the federal government will end its use of private prisons. Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates said in a statement that private prisons, quote, do not provide the same level of correctional services, programs, and resources. They do not save substantially on costs. And as noted in a recent report by the department's Office of the Inspector General, they do not maintain the same level of safety and security, end quote. Now, here to talk about this and other topics in the news this week are our line panelists, Dan Foley, former New Mexico House Minority Whip. Merritt Allen is here. She's from Vox Optima LLC. Sophie Martin, an attorney and editor of DukeCityFix.com. And Andy Lyman's back. He's a reporter with the NM Political Report. Welcome all. Now, Daniel, DOJ has already not renewed the contract of New Mexico's only federally run facility here. About 300 jobs in Cibola County. There's not a lot of prisons we're talking about nationwide here, but it is significant and to some people. To you, is it significant and why?
So, yes and no.
Okay.
And the reason I say yes and no is when I was in the legislature, we made the move towards privatizing prisons.
During the Gary Johnson
during the Gary Johnson administration. And then I was there for the outer years after that under almost the entire Richardson administration.
Right.
And now, I'm not in the legislature now, so I don't want to say something that people are like, oh, there's a new report yesterday.
Right.
It was saving money. It was saving a significant amount of money.
You're talking here in
New Mexico.
Okay.
I mean, it was a significant amount of money. It was also...
And this is for state prisons or federal?
This was the state prisons,
that
they were running. It was saving a significant amount of money. It was creating better opportunities for these prisons to be up to code and run. It was getting the state of New Mexico out from the Duran Decree and other things that were exacerbating the cost of doing this stuff. With that said, obviously, if it's not working, it needs to be looked at. I think at the end of the day saying, well, at the federal level, there's no way it saves any money and there's no way it's working, so we're completely undoing it. You know, I have yet to see the federal government be really good at anything. I have yet to see a program that they just are, wow, this is miraculous. You guys run this better than anybody else. I think that what you'll find is a lot of these federal prisons, at least from some of the stuff that I've been reading, a lot of these federal prisons, there are some questions about them. But it's because of a lack of oversight, right? It's someone just kind of started signing off on paperwork. Someone became friends with somebody and, yep, we inspected you and we didn't. Yep, we inspected you and we didn't. That doesn't mean...
But it's not part of that the profit motive, that people tend to cut corners, they tend to shave here, they tend to shave
I don't think it's so much
there.
that it's the profit motive, I think it's human nature,
okay.
right? I think the more freedom that you're giving on these contracts, the less that you're having to start watching down the chain, the more you're able to try to expand your business deal. A lot of these folks that got in the private prison business went from the private prison business to the private transportation business to the private healthcare prison business, and so they kept stepping out and doing more and more and more. I think at the end of the day, it's an extremely expensive task, and you know it's got to be done correctly. There's no doubt about it, but it's really expensive.
Sophie, ACLU has come out strong saying this is significant. Absolutely. Is it more symbolism than actual fact? What to you?
No, I mean, actually, I think one of the pieces of information that has been largely overlooked in the coverage of this shift on the part of the Department of Justice is that the federal prison population that is sort of under the purview of the DOJ has decreased, and has decreased to such an extent that the Department of Justice needed to make a choice about, well, it looks like we can now house these prisoners in federally owned prisons and federally run prisons, or we can make the decision to continue with the private prisons. And looking at the numbers and where things were going, they made a decision, it sounds like, based partly on principle, but also on sort of here are the numbers that we've got. They made the decision to move back over to the federal prisons. And that, I think, is one thing that we want to bear in mind. We say, you know, we lost 300 jobs because of the closing in New Mexico. It seems to me we would have lost those jobs regardless, that they were going to have to consolidate prisoners. They were going to have to, you can't have a prison open. We always talk about prison overcrowding, which is certainly a very big issue, but you can't have a prison open for 100 people.
That's a good point.
And so we should understand that this was likely going to happen for New Mexico either way.
It's interesting, almost like a bracket closing. I hadn't thought about that angle. Merritt, again, symbolism for some people, huge, small for some other people. Are we safer on the streets? Are we, as citizens, what's the upshot here for everybody else?
Well, I think from a state perspective, we have kind of a checkered past with our private prisons. We implemented them under the Johnson administration. They continued under the Richardson administration. One of the prison company's chief lobbyists, just got out of federal prison. One of the first things the Martinez administration did was fine private prison providers for not meeting their contracts. And so, like any outsourcing effort in the government, it all depends on how the contract is written.
Gotcha.
And if the requirements are written properly, it can work. If the requirements are not written properly or not enforced, certainly there is an opportunity for abuse, whether it's cutting corners, whatever that may be. So Dan's point, oversight is huge. And you know, the point I'd like to make about our state prison situation. If you're a defense attorney in Albuquerque with federal clients, you have to drive from Estancia to Grants several times a week because none of our local Albuquerque metro jails can meet federal standards.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of it is because of overcrowding. So we have a huge incarcerated population. I don't know that cutting prison capacity is a great idea. So I hope, you know, to Sophie's point, we have fewer federal prisoners. That's great news, but in the state, that's something I think we have to look at is can we cut capacity?
Right. Good point there. Interesting. Andy, you know, the type of prisoners these facilities were housing, Merrick makes an interesting point, kind of in a sideways way. It wasn't like they were, you know, triple murderers here. You know what I mean? It's a whole different sort of a holding situation. So to Sophie's point, if we were going to come to a contraction point, what's the problem? Doesn't seem like it's a big problem here. The government's saving money. Right? Isn't that a big deal for some folks? Sounds pretty good.
Yeah, and I've had conversations with some people in reporting that you could easily just shift some, if some other prisons, we could shut some other private prisons down in the state, and we still have a building in Cibola County, right? Just because the private industry is not running it, we still have a building that's going to be empty. So if there's overcrowding somewhere else, we can still move public prisoners to that building.
Let's take on state prisons. That came up a second ago too. State-run private prisons, I should say. You know, we've had a lot of issues here. We've had Peter Simonson here from the ACLU a couple of weeks ago talking about things, prisoners' rights, things like that. Is it your sense that the prisoners themselves are going to be better off in a government-run facility versus a private facility? Do we know that automatically?
I think that goes to another problem with private. Mother Jones just did a really good in-depth article and the point of this guy going undercover in the Mother Jones article was that you can't get that public information. It's not public information because it's a private company. So I guess my answer is we don't know exactly how they are treated there because we don't have access to those videos, we don't have access to those records or any directives within that private prison.
And to that point, is that part of what Dan's talking about with oversight? Is that make it easier for the press to be an oversight body, to have a federally run facility?
I think so, and
Okay.
the press and just the public in general, right?
Yeah.
That's a public information request.
Or the contract that's drafted, like Merrick said, you know, if the contract is drafted that says, you know, this stuff is going to be made public, this stuff's going to be done. I don't think Cibola.
But that's not possible, though, with a private prison.
Sure it is.
Yeah, it is.
Really? Would someone actually sign a
Well,
contract like
it's
that, saying you're
interesting, actually.
so?
One of the
Okay.
things that the
like it.
DOJ found with private prisons was that they, in some circumstances, were not correctly logging and storing the very video that we would rely on to determine whether they were doing a good job or not. So there's that sort of extra layer. We can see that in government as well. But there's the enforcement bit that you were talking about as well.
Well, Gene, I think that, you know, when you say would they sign that contract, if you're in the federal prison business,
Right.
you're going to sign the contract with the federal government. There's no other options.
point. That's a good
Now,
point.
I do
Yeah.
think that, you know, I am willing to bet, which is a sad indication of where we are in the state of New Mexico, that the Grants prison isn't going to be empty very long. I don't think this thing's going to be shuttered and people are going to be driving by saying, that's the old Grants prison.
right.
I think that thing's going to be filled
Making movies
right away.
there, the whole thing, right?
Yeah, I don't think they'll be making movies there. I think there's going to
That's
be
right.
prisoners there quickly.
right.
I mean, I think we're overloaded in other places, and we also have the immigration people that are still looking
That's right.
for places to house
And
individuals.
that may crack the door open again. Sophie, I want to bring something on the table you put on the table for us this week, and that is the idea that there's been a recent ruling by DOJ about the rights of folks who are indigent, especially, to be able to pay bail. And there's been a ruling.
So what's
Tell us
fascinating
about
about New Mexico is that I want to say it's upward of 80% of the people in certain of New Mexico's prisons are there because they can't pay bail. And this has become a focus of the New Mexico Supreme Court. In fact, the court has set up a committee to study this, and the committee presented at the State Bar Conference a week ago, and they are moving toward what ultimately will be something that we all get to vote on, a New Mexico constitutional amendment that would change the bonding system in New Mexico, such that it would give judges the ability to focus on the individual, their likelihood of flight, the severity of their crime in the context of who the person is, as opposed to just saying it's this crime and therefore it's this amount. We see too many people in New Mexico who are being held on what sounds like not very much bond money, 160, 200, and they can't get out.
That's right.
Because
For
they don't
days.
have
That's right.
access,
Well, it's
or
not- it's not
longer
even-
because
it's
they
not
don't have
even-
access to
it's
that
not even
money.
they don't have the money, it's that they're held on $160. But when you go, I can just tell you, I know how this works.
Mm-hmm.
When you go ask for, lots of times when you go ask for a bond, there's a quasi-credit check also. I mean,
That's
now
right.
you may have the $160 to
right.
pay them, but nobody wants to take the risk of giving you the bond. That's another, that's as big of a question as well too. And if you're
And the constitutionality
indigent,
of that,
but if you're
though,
indigent,
is-
you're probably not going to have a very great credit history.
The
That's
flip
right,
of it
that's
is
right.
this. The flip of it is this. You may be somebody who is stuck in prison because of these circumstances on an offense that you don't really present a danger to the public. On the other hand, there may be somebody who's quite dangerous. And under our current Constitution, they are required to be offered bail and extended bail. And if they can pay the money, they're out.
Wow.
Now, if they commit another crime while they're out on bail, no matter the size of
Right.
the bail,
Right.
they don't lose the money. The bail bondsman doesn't lose the money. And so it's a perverse set of incentives. If you can pay your way out,
Right.
you don't lose any money even if you commit another crime, the very thing that we're trying to prevent with our bond system.
Which is
So
what happened to the gentleman which is what happened with the officer that was killed in Rio Rancho.
that's exactly
That
right.
gentleman
That's
was out
exactly
on
right.
bail.
So
That's
that amendment is going to come up before the voters in
Mm-hmm.
November. I don't know how much attention it's going to get leading up to that point, but I think that the court and the attorneys who've been working with them have been have crafted something really useful. So I hope it does get.
We're going to track this one. This should be very, very interesting. Now, when we come back to the line, we'll discuss Governor Martinez's plans for reintroducing the death penalty during the 2017 session.